Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. As you know, we've been working on bringing on new voices, talking to new people, and sharing new ideas over the past couple of months. This week, on this episode, we are going to focus on digital art, and I will be welcoming Don Masse to the show. You're probably familiar with Don if you ever attend Art Ed Now conferences. He has presented at almost every single conference we have put on, and every time he shows up, he is amazing. And I knew he had been a guest on the podcast before, but I also knew it had been a while, so I was curious. I looked it up, and it's been a long while. Don was on episode 9, which was released on April 12th, 2016. Okay, this is episode 197, so 3.5 years and 188 episodes ago. And just by the way, as an aside, that was a great episode. It was early on in the life of this podcast, and the quality's a little rough, but it was a great one. It's called No More Dead White Guys, and it was all about how we need to find more contemporary artists and more relevant artists to show our students. Don does a great job with that throughout all of his teaching. Has been doing it for a long time. So it wouldn't surprise me if he mentions a few artists in the course of our chat about digital art today. But if you have time, go back and give that episode a listen. I think you will enjoy it. But like I said, we are here today to talk digital art. So let's get moving in that direction and bring Don on the line so we can start the conversation. All right, and from San Diego, California, Mr. Don Masse is joining me now. Don, how are you?
Good. Not too bad. We might actually get a little bit of rain here in San Diego.
Oh, nice. Well, we're still all going to continue to be jealous that you're in San Diego, but, I wanted to have you on so we could talk about digital art, digital experiments. You do so many really, really cool things with your kids. I think you have a lot to offer, a lot people can learn. So can we just start off with something kind of broad, kind of general? Can you just talk about some of your more popular experiments that you've been doing digitally over the past couple of years?
Yeah, sure. One thing that I started to experiment with last year, and my third graders are actually doing it right now. We've been experimenting with green screen. There's an app called Doink, and my third graders have been creating these paper sculpture playgrounds. So they are playground designers, right? The prompt is, if you were to build a playground, what would you include? What would it look like? So they're using, paper techniques, paper sculpture techniques, and I've gone out and shot photographs of our North Campus playground that they play on every day, and we take their sculptures back to the green screen. We take a photograph of it, and then we use that app and put them together, and their sculptures are there in the present, and the kids are totally stoked about it. They get super excited when they go from like the green background, all of a sudden it shows up in the photograph. So I think that's been really exciting for them and for me. It's always cool to see the enthusiasm,
For sure.
how much they're engaged in it. And another one that I've done for a few years is they create digital sculptures in this app called Morphe, and with that, it has like an AR feature. So they can build the sculpture. We'll do it in the classroom. They hit this 3D button, and it basically turns their flat design into a 3D solid. And then we go outside, and they can play with scale. They can play with perspective and point of view. Where they go outside, they interact with our playground or our school campus. So it looks like their sculpture is physically out there on the playground or floating in the air. I talk about Pokemon Go to start with it. It makes it so relevant for them, and they're like, "Yeah, all right." And that project is really cool because they're building it and they're going outside, but they are doing a little bit of role play too. They're going out with a partner, and so they'll be posing with the sculptures and things like that. So that's been really fun to play with. And then I do a lot of stop motion too. Some of it is there's an app called Flip a Clip, which is basically just like the old school flip books. And the kids can create, kind of stories or narratives with those. There's another stop motion app, well, an app called Assembly, and we create kind of moving GIFs with it. GIFs or GIFs? I can't.
I always go GIFs, but just because the guy who created them thought that's how they should be pronounced, so I figure I'll take his. But anyway, that's not important right now.
Those are a few that I've revisited over the past couple of years that kids have been pretty hooked on.
Yeah, that's really cool. And, I love that project where kids are, outside taking digital photos at your school, and then creating work that's kind of specific to the location. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Just the different things you've done with lessons similar to that, and I guess why you think that's been so successful with your kids?
That is a project that I do with second graders, and it's with an app called Assembly. And what they do is they don't actually take the photographs. I see my students 2 times out of every 6 weeks. So for them to kind of add like the photography element into it can be kind of challenging if we want to fit like as much in as possible.
Right.
So I'll go out and I'll document spots on the campus for that activity. So they've got those kind of loaded into the iPad already, but they choose a wall and they use that as the background in this app called Assembly. It's basically like a digital collage app. There's really nothing else like it out there. So it's really fun to play with. But they create a symmetrical design it could be a wall, it could be a wall somewhere else on campus. And we have a really rich mural program already at our school. So when they create kind of like these digital murals on the walls, they're familiar with it. There's like an enthusiasm kind of built into that whole process because of the familiarity with it. We look at the artist Maya Hayuk when we start the project to kind of connect it to a contemporary artist. And as far as what they need to include, they just need to include symmetry and geometric shapes, and that really opens up a whole lot of possibilities in terms of what the visual product is going to look like. There's not a whole lot of constraints there, so you get stuff that's figurative, you get stuff that's really like non-objective. So there's a really wonderful variety of end products that happen with that. And so I do that in second grade. And then last year, I actually revisited that project too. I was talking about the murals that I do on campus, or that the fifth graders do. And we looked at an artist named LaQuena MacGyver, who creates these very inspirational kind of murals and public works where she combines graphic elements with inspirational or positive quotes, positive messages. And I tasked the fifth graders, if you were to design a mural like this for Zamorano, what would it look like? What would you say to other students with this mural? And that was really engaging. There was a lot of, interesting phrases and stuff that came out of it. And with that project, what we ended up doing is selecting one of those digital murals to turn into our fifth grade legacy mural last year. And the kids were just super, super excited about that. And most of the time when I do the designing, when we do the murals, I do the designing for them. But with this, using this app, using kind of like this process, that's what's going to happen with the rest of them. It's going to be student designs. They can handle it with the app. It's very user friendly, and they can create these really dynamic images that we can then turn into real murals and beautify our campus.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love the idea of just having those student-led projects. I think that's that will leave a really nice legacy, and kids will love to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I just really like the idea of like some of like that project in particular, or the playground project, kind of connecting the digital, but then also the real world, kind of playing with like the back and forth and the duality of it,
Yeah,
to be able
absolutely.
to do something digital and turn it into a real thing.
Yeah, that's really nice. Now, another thing I wanted to ask you about, something we've talked before. You've told me that kids get most excited about, those digital experiments, those ideas that they relate to, the things that, they're consuming outside of school with green screen and animations and pixel art. So, why do you make those topics, an important part of your curriculum?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's extremely relevant to them. They're around that stuff on an everyday basis. So why not,
Mm-hmm.
teach them and let them see how these things work? They're consuming them on a daily basis. I think it's really important to, give them or empower them to learn how to use the technology themselves. So if they're seeing something on their computer screen at home, they get like I know how they did that. Or, they're watching a movie, they're watching the Avengers or something like that. They're like, oh, well, they're using green screen technology in there, building up the literacy with these forms that they're digesting every day. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Were you going to say something else? I'm sorry.
No. I was, just kind of giving them a chance to kind of like peek behind the curtain. Like when I talk about this stuff, I think about like the the Wizard of Oz when they,
Yes.
the curtain gets rolled back and the wizard, the little guys right there. It's like kind of like giving them that like point of view, So it's there's a magic to it, but this is how they're actually doing it. You can do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, I guess going a little bit further there, beyond just giving them that knowledge, that look behind the scenes, what are some of the other benefits that you've seen, in working with digital with your kids?
One of the biggest bonuses that I've seen is that it having that undo button, or that delete, the little trash can there, has
Mm-hmm.
really freed kids up. People that get like super tight if they make a mistake with the eraser, or we're working with other materials, they're working with watercolor and they put a color down. That delete, that like non-history, kind of really frees kids up and allows them to take more risks with the creative process. They don't get caught up at the very beginning of it. They just hit delete and then they can move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's really important. One of the other things too is that it gives kids that struggle with some fine motor abilities or capabilities uh, opportunities to shine in your curriculum as well. They may get frustrated, that it doesn't look a certain way. Well, with certain apps that you use, like Assembly, for instance, you're kind of moving around shapes, changing colors, things like that. It rises them up or gives them an opportunity to shine as well. I think, when you're trying to reach everybody, these apps and these tools are really important to have in your curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of value there. And like you said, letting those kids shine. And that, kind of leads me into my next question too. As you're getting into more of these digital art experiments and digital art lessons, do you find yourself getting away from more traditional materials, or like, how do you try and balance things for your kids?
Well, I definitely want to maintain that balance. I don't want to take away from the traditional concepts and materials, because I think it's really important to have that firsthand experience with chalk pastel or relief
Yeah.
printmaking, or
Yeah.
watercolor painting, things like that. But I also think it's important, that they have that balance. It's a tool that's out there that they're exposed to. I think they deserve the opportunity to work with it. And as far as kind of balancing things, uh, I see my students. I think I mentioned it earlier, like twice out of every 6 weeks, so it's really not that often. But
Hmm.
um, I meet with them basically like 10 times a year, and with the lower kids, it's like um, one digital art project. With the upper grades, like third through fifth, it's two, maybe three with like 3D printing. So I still think there's a good balance there. But when I see my kids, one week, let's say we are like the Maya Hayuk digital mural example. They were doing like a cut paper collage with symmetry the first week, and then they come back the second week and they'll do a digital experiment with that same vocabulary. So it allows them to kind of, it reinforces the same concepts, but you're using different materials, the digital versus the cut paper. Or when the fourth graders do the Morphe AR project, the next week they come back and they're creating these mirror drawings inspired by Heather Hansen. And it's a whole different kind of collaboration where it's silent and they're kind of like doing this dance back and forth. But again, you're reinforcing the same concepts, so I kind of play it like that as far as going back and forth between digital and traditional so they can, get as much out of the content as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like that. I think that balance is important, and especially when you don't get to see them as much, I think you need to be really conscious of that. I guess just last question for you to kind of wrap things up here. Do you have any suggestions or ideas that you can share with the audience? Just advice, recommendations for apps, ideas for lessons, or just anything else you want to share?
Well, I think it's important. Like if you're just starting with digital technology in your class, you need to, I think, carefully think about how it fits into it. You don't want to just have this kind of like one-off kind of thing. I think you need to be, careful and think about how it complements and enhances the creative learning that your students are already involved with, so you have that. And I think it's important if you're just starting to, don't be afraid to just give it a try. It wasn't until I think it was like 4 years ago, I had a whole iPad cart in my classroom for like a year and I didn't know what to do with it. I was just like, it's like this daunting kind of cube in the corner. It was very traditional, hands-on. And then I went to NAEA in New York and I saw a couple of people at like a maker space using Morphe and things like that. I was like, you know what? It can't hurt to try it. What's wrong with that? So I went back and then I was hooked. The kids were engaged. I was engaged. So I think if there's any hesitancy there, your kids are going to love it. So you should give it a try. I feel like I've grown so much as an educator and frankly as an artist since I've started to experiment with the digital technology in my classroom. It started to inform my own artistic practice, the stuff that I do. As far as kind of apps, I think, like I mentioned, Assembly and Morphe, there's a great Pixel app called Pixel Studio, Flip a Clip, the Do Ink green screen. There's one that I haven't talked about, but in the winter conference, I'll be talking about and using Pixlr. It's a photo editor. So that's a great app that you can use with your students. And really, like all these things apply, like K-12, I think they all have applications. You can scale things up, you can scale things down. When I work with digital technology, I have the kids partner up all the time. I do that for a few reasons. One of them is that it really allows them to develop their social skills, teamwork, or, just like the soft skills of collaboration and compromise and respecting each other's opinions. It allows them to develop more ownership with the technology. They can kind of teach one another. And it makes things more manageable for me. Instead of having like 30 tablets out there, if I have 15, it just makes things more easy for me to kind of deal with too. But,
that's important. Logistics are important.
Yeah. Like if and I've done a couple projects with the fifth graders and fourth graders that it's individual iPads and it gets too harried for me. So I think, you need to realize your limitations when it comes to the tech too. What can you handle in your classroom?
Yeah, that's a good point. So cool. All right. Well, Don, thank you so much for the advice, the recommendations, and thank you for giving us some time and kind of sharing all these ideas. It's been good to talk to you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
As Don mentioned, he will be coming back to the Art Ed Now Winter Conference, which is happening on February 1st of next year. So on February 1st, 2020, that is a Saturday, we'll have over 20 presentations at that conference that are all online, all incredible, and all relevant to what you're doing right now in your classroom. So we have opportunities for art making, new ideas for your classrooms, such as experiments in digital art and digital photography. We have inspiration for you and just a full day of relevant and engaging professional development. So all of those innovative and inspiring talks and new ideas and resources and downloads you can use throughout the year, they are all going to work for you. So you can learn everything you need to know about the conference at artednow.com. So make sure you go check that out after this episode is over. Okay, but thank you to Don for coming on, and thank you to all of you for listening. I hope that you were able to take some new ideas away from this episode and implement them in your classroom. You're probably not going to start with site-specific mural design, but you can start with something small. Like Don said, just give it a try. Maybe it's just one project. Maybe it's just one class, but find yourself a new app. You can go back to an old app if you need, but play, experiment, and create. See what piques your interest or what might be good for your students. Give it a try, and then once you're feeling comfortable, let your students give it a try as well. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Please make sure you tune in next week. We have a big name and a big announcement coming, so we will talk to you then.